Praise be to Jesus Christ, and welcome to Catholic Forum. I'm your guest host, Alan Dunstan. We want to thank you for being with us today. We hope that our little conversation here in West Michigan finds you wherever you may be and draws you a little bit closer to Jesus Christ through His one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. One thing about the Catholic Church is we are a church of both and. For instance, Martin Luther proposed a axiom of sola fide, faith alone. And the Catholic Church has always taught that faith is indeed a bedrock, but that there's more to it. For instance, the book of James tells us faith without works is dead. And we're going to be talking a little bit with a gentleman who has experienced a life where his passion, his faith has really fed into service in some remarkable ways. So we want to share that with you, and we want to thank Ted Allen for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Alan. I'm glad to be here at the television studios to talk about my faith journey.
Well, thanks for being with us. Yours is a very interesting journey. We're going to set the stage a little bit because you've had almost a series of close calls, I guess we'll call them, as you were growing up. Let's talk about kind of how that set the scene, as it were, for your later life. Now, when you were growing up, you were raised Catholic, is that right?
Yes, I was, Alan. I was raised Catholic. The church I started going to when I was in grade school was St. John Vianney. And then from there I went to St. Mary Magdalene. We had moved from Kentwood, into Kentwood, and so we had moved closer to, at that time, going to St. Mary Magdalene. And then after St. Mary Magdalene, Kathy and I, when we got married, are now members of St. Jude Church.
Okay. So we're going to step back a bit in time, because before you came to St. John Vianney, you were born in Florida. Correct?
Yes, I was born in Pensacola, Florida, actually closer to Panama City, Florida. And I remember in my kindergarten year, I had flunked kindergarten because I had missed so many days. And when you move from a tropical climate to a cold climate as Michigan, my blood was too thin and I couldn't take the climate change. And that following winter when we moved in Michigan, I came down with measles, mumps, pneumonia, chicken pox. I had it all. And I had missed a considerable amount of school, and so I flunked kindergarten. And that's something that I had a real hard time carrying because I thought I was I was not a very smart kid. So when the whole class goes ahead of you, you stay in kindergarten. That haunted me my whole life. But that's another story. Right. But the sickness was such that I had become quite ill, and at that time I had quite a fever for quite a while. But I broke the fever. But my mom remembers me telling her that she thought I was going to die. But at that time I told her I'm not going to die. I'm going to be fine. But at that moment, I don't remember saying that, but my mom does, and I'd recovered fully from that childhood illness. And that was actually the first one. It was a series of dots, if you will, and that was actually the first dot that I was too small to connect.
Right, sure.
And my faith journey actually continued to the next step, and it was a childhood experience. And when we lived in Kentwood, there was a pool by our house. And my friends were telling me to jump in the deep end. It was a hot summer day. We were sitting outside the pool, and they were all telling me you could jump in the pool, jump in the deep end. They were trying to tease me and see if I had the courage to jump in the pool in the deep end. I thought I could swim, so I jumped in the deep end. And off the diving board, and as it turned out, I could not swim, and I went straight to the bottom of the pool. And as standing in the bottom of the pool, I could see the bubbles from the drain coming up, and I was starting to gasp for air, and this is just a matter of seconds. And I thought for a moment, I think I might drown. But then the hook from the lifeguard come through the water. It was a metal silver hook. I just grabbed onto the hook, and the lifeguard simply pulled me out of the pool. And lo and behold, I walked away from that one. But again, there's the dot that I didn't connect because I wasn't actually playing connect the dots at that time.
Sure.
And life went on. Then in the high school, my senior year, my friends and I, on spring break, it was on a dark night during spring break in April, we had gotten a Camaro and we had done some drinking and we were drunk. and I was in the back seat. My friend was driving. And we had crashed his Camaro into trees. We were going probably 75 to 80 miles an hour, and my friend passed off the wheel and went into the set of trees. And I was in the back seat of the car, and the two people in the front seat, the passengers went through the windshield, and the driver was crushed in the car, and the steering wheel crushed his face, and he was leaning up against a tree. Quickly, I wasn't even thinking, but I got out of the car, kicked the door open, and took the passenger out of the car and put him on the ground, put my coat over him, and I actually thought that individual had died. Then I, at that moment, ran down the road, found help. Then there was a person in the car that actually, at that time, they had CB radios, and there was no cell phones.
Right.
So
right.
just the CB radio, and the person in the CB radio had called. Then we drove to the wreck, and the lady in the pickup truck said to me, "Where do you live?" And I said, "I live in Grand Rapids." And she says, "Well, how'd you get here?" And I said, "I was in the back seat of that car." She looked at me, "How did you live through that? It looks like everybody's dead." And I said, "I walked away." By then the police had got there, the Michigan State Police, and I got in the back of the police car, and they were tearing apart the wreck, and the policeman got in the car with me and said, "You are very lucky to live through this wreck, and unfortunately you saved 2 lives, but you walked away unharmed." He goes, "That's unbelievable." That's another dot in my life that I did not connect. Years went by after that, a long time. And in the meantime, I started giving blood when I was in junior college. I was preparing to go to enroll in pre-med, and one of the assignments in one of my anatomy classes for an extra credit assignment was to give blood. So I went and give blood. My grades needed it, so that all helped. And when I give blood, I continued to give blood at the same time while I was going to college. And I went through that, and I'd been giving blood for many, many years. But another dot was going to come into my life that I would start to connect. And I'm a motorcycle rider. I've been riding a motorcycle my whole life. And I went out and on June of 2011, it was June, I believe. It was a hot, sunny day. I was rear-ended by a car on East Belline. And the car pushed my motorcycle down, and I had just stepped off the motorcycle and called the 911 dispatcher, and the dispatcher was amazed that I was not killed in the accident. So that's actually the first thing she said. She sent the police car, and the officer at that time, as soon as he got out of the car, the first thing he said is that, "I'm amazed. You shouldn't be, this doesn't happen." At that time, I started connecting some dots, and there's something going on here. There's something going on bigger than my life. I just keep walking away from these things. And that's when I started connecting dots. And I'm thinking, there's a call in my life. I can feel it, but I don't necessarily hear it. That's the way I felt, Alan. But at that time, then again at the time I was still going to church and just sitting in church, just going through the motions, but nothing really actively involved. At that moment, I thought that there was something bigger than my life that was calling me, but I didn't know what. And while at church, I've always had a feeling to be in public speaking. That's where all of my self-motivation come from, is in public speaking. So I thought, well, I want to be a lecturer. And when Kathy and I got married, that's kind of a thing that I always like to do. I did readings the first reading I did was actually at our wedding. I did the readings at our wedding.
Okay.
And that's when the seed was planted, when we got married. I kept doing it more, and I became a lecturer at church at St. Jude and kept reading. And my faith journey at that point started growing within me. I'm thinking, when I was reading from the lectionary, at first it started out I was scared and I was nervous, but the more I read, the more it became part of my life, the more it became part of my faith, that it grew with me. Then I became a then Father asked me to teach third grade children. And I taught all 5 grades, 1 through 5, but currently I teach third grade kids.
Okay.
And then again, when I taught the children, I remember one little girl I taught, she come up to me one day and she said, "Mr. Ted, I made something for you." And I go, what'd you make? And she said, "I made you this." And she pulled out a cross. She had made out of wood, and she pounded some nails sideways in the wood, and she even somehow stained it. And it was a cross, and I just held it in my hand. And I just looked at it and looked at her, and I thought, this is God talking to me. She made me the cross, and that is when I knew, that is when the faith started building. It was like a snowball. It starts out small, and it just starts rolling along and getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you start off in simple obedience, following that calling, and yet in obedience you actually are fed, and you find that faith growing.
Yes. I'm fed, and when a child hands you a cross that they've made and they say, "I want to give this to you," that touched my heart. Or when a child hands you a Valentine that says, "Mr. Ted, you are the best teacher in the world," or when a child says, "Mr. Ted, you rock," those things are the food that feed my spirit, or feed my faith. Feed my faith, exactly.
Sure.
Those things.
Yeah, and why don't we talk about that? I want to just kind of reference one reading that I think your story so far kind of really speaks to, and this is in Ephesians 2, let's see here, 2:8. It says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from you, it is the gift of God. It is not from works, so no one may boast. For we are his handiwork, created in Christ Jesus for the good works that God has prepared in advance that we should live in them." And I just, when you're listening to your story, it almost is just kind of jumps out of the words, because it's your faith, that God has kind of given to you, and yet you've got these, opportunities that you're taking advantage of.
It's like, Alan, that God has given you faith, but it's a bit wrapped up, and you need to unwrap it and look at it in various ways and find it. It's there, but you can't see it. Kind of like Jesus Christ himself. He's there, but you can't see him. You don't see faith. You have to feel it in your heart. And I feel it in my mind, and it becomes part of you. And that's when you say, yes, I believe.
And this is where Martin Luther got it right, is faith is a gift.
It is.
And so
it is a gift.
And it's something that we're called to act on. And
It is, Alan. It is. It is a gift. And it's a gift you have to open up, unwrap it, look at it, handle it, work with it, and then form it in your own life. And the thing is, like people, everybody's different. I think faith is the same way. It's different for everybody. It takes different forms, different shapes, and I think faith, in as such, it can grows like a snowball. It's not here at this size. It changes. It's malleable. It moves. It vacillates. It changes in your life.
Well, it starts out as a mustard seed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It ebbs and it flows, and I have to admit that my faith wanes. It wanes a lot, and I have to admit that I think of a lot of things that bolster my faith, and then I bring myself back to my grounding and say, yes, I believe again.
Sure.
It changes.
And some, if we have like saints like Teresa Avila would say that, there are dark times of the soul, or, and there's times of consolation, and there's times of dryness,
yes,
and things like that. And so you've just, part of what makes faith is the holding on to it.
Right. And my faith journey actually is a journey that I wanted, the more I did for the church, the more I wanted to do. And I'm kind of them people that can't shut myself off, And I keep doing too much and too much and too much, and finally I just run out. I have to stop. But I scale myself back. But the faith that really set my life in motion, Alan, was the jail ministry.
Okay.
The jail ministry is the ministry that really solidified my faith and forced me to study my life and really look at my life. And it took me out of the church into a different area that was foreign to me, and it tested my faith. And then when my faith was tested, and then my faith was actually strengthened by the things that happened in the jail, that's when I said, yes, this is real. I believe even more now. I actually went into the jail lukewarm, not quite. I was a believer, and as a teacher, sometimes I know teachers out there, when you teach, you go through the litany, it's all rote, and you just go through a script, and it becomes easy, and you just do it automatically. And that's what I did. But the part that changed is when you get the feedback from the people that you deliver your service to, and they tell you, yes, you have helped me change my life. That is the faith.
Now tell us a little bit how you got into that, because that's kind of an interesting...
That ministry was a ministry that I didn't actually want to do. A man at church, Brian, because I had been lecturing at St. Jude for many years, he had always asked me to join the jail ministry. And I told him, I said, Brian, I'm already teaching. I'm a lecturer. I'm on the parish council. I've done that. And I said, I'm really busy. He said, no, you need to be in the jail ministry. And I said, I'm too busy. And he was persistent. He would not back down. And he kept coming at me, So I said, Brian, I told him one day, I said, Brian, if I just go to the meeting downtown at the Cathedral Square, will you just not ask me no more about this, and then we'll move on? He goes, I'll be quiet if you do it. So I said, okay, I'll go to the meeting. And then at the meeting, I sat there and I heard the stories about the jail and the need in the jail. And this started to plant a seed, but I didn't know it. At the end of the meeting, there was paperwork I had to fill out, and then Jude went to everybody and asked for a commitment. We need a commitment right now. And she came to me and said, we need a commitment. Are you going to do it? And I said, well, I don't think so. She goes, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. The paperwork and all the clearances and what we have to do is going to take about a year anyways. So just start the paperwork, go through it, and then you got time to think about it. And if at the end of the year you don't want to do it, we can just stop. We can just turn it away. So I went through it. I did the paperwork, got all the clearances, and about a year went by. And one day Jude called and said, Ted, you're cleared to go to the jail. I said, I am. She goes, yep, you went. So let's go. I said, well, I don't. Just go. Just please go. Okay, fine. And I said, I probably won't like it. I'll do it. And on one hand, I was scared going into the jail. And I was also scared of being my own person to deliver communion, because I had become a Eucharistic minister, and I haven't done that before, but I became a Eucharistic minister, and that in itself takes many steps to go through, and I got that, and that was part of the training. So all that was foreign to me, and I was nervous, I was scared, but I said, okay, fine, I'll try it. And the first time I went to the jail, the very first time, and I delivered a service, and then I realized from what the men in jail told me that I had changed their life and helped them start a new direction. That is what really made my faith solidify into what it is now. That's I do believe. And I tell the men in my service, this service is not going to be like going to church. I'm a teacher, and I'm going to put you to work. I'm going to give all you men assignments. And I'm going to go around each person. I want your name. I'm going to give you an assignment, and we're going to read, and we're all going to participate. And this is going to be different. I'm not going to sit here and be one way telling you what I think. I want to know what you think. And when you start talking that way, the barriers break down, and men, they open up and they start to talk about their faith. Mm-hmm. And that's what really feeds my faith.
Right.
That's when you get the food, the feeding of faith. Mm-hmm. That yes, this is true. I believe, and that's where I start. I believe, in the definition of faith is believing without proof, and that's where I start. And then I want to bring, when we get to there, I want to bring a foundation of reality to them. And I always ask, when I'm teaching, I always ask offhanded questions to catch people off guard. They're all going, the lights go on. The lights go on. They're just, and that's how I bring my service to the jail. I like to get them to think and bring new things into their life.
When you mentioned breaking down some barriers, and when you first went into the jail,
right?
You had to overcome a little bit to put yourself in that, and let's talk about that a little.
Okay, what I grew up with is, my dad was from the South. He was born in Memphis, Tennessee, and my dad was a good man, and he'd done many good things in life, but he had racial hatred in his heart. Mm-hmm. In the dying days of his life, at the end of his life, when he died in 1996 on his dying bed, I asked my dad, I said, "Dad, why do you hate so much? Why do you hate people that are a different color of your skin? Why?" And I just got quiet, and I sat in that chair. When he laid in his bed with the feeding tube in his stomach. We sat there for 2 hours, and he couldn't come up. He just laid there, and I just sat there. I said, "I'm still waiting for an answer." Mm. And I sat there for 3 hours, and I said, I don't think you're going to come up with anything. I don't think you will." He said, "You're right." And I said, "I'll tell you why you hate. Because you were taught to hate. That's why. It's just that simple." But that's what planted the seed in my heart to teach love. That planted the seed. Mm-hmm. And that's what I bring to the jail. That touches my heart. I sincerely believe that this world needs love taught, and people need to understand the difference between love and hate. What Jesus Christ did when he was on this earth was to teach love. Mm-hmm. And that was in my life, again, for a reason. And it's a dot that I couldn't connect when I was a child, but now I've connected that dot again.
I do want to, not leave our viewers not understanding, though, that your father, on his last days, you were telling me that he actually grew close to people of color that you wouldn't have imagined. Right,
that's right, Alan. When my dad was at Mary Free Bed Hospital, I'd come in one day after work, and I went up to his room, and he said, "Ted, I want you to meet the closest man in my life. He's saving my life." I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah. His name is Robert." And I said, "Cool. Oh, great, Dad. Great. Yeah. Robert taught him how to eat, taught him to walk, and he saved his life." He goes, "I want you to meet Robert. He's like my son." I go, "Okay, I can't wait to meet him." Robert come in, and he'd sit down, he'd put my arm around my dad. My dad says, "How you like Robert?" I go, "Hey, Dad, there's something wrong." He goes, "What?" I said, "Dad, Robert's black." He looked at him, he goes, "Oh, I never even thought of that." And at that moment, I'm thinking, Eureka. The Lord, it's fixed. There's love. And I said, "Dad, the people that you've hated your whole life are the people that are keeping you alive now and saving your life." And that continued to the very end of his life when he was in his final days. He goes, "Oh, I was wrong. I felt so bad." But that, again, solidified my faith that teaching love is what I need to do with my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, it's remarkable how much that you're giving yourself to service is feeding you and,
Yeah.
and helping you to grow.
It's kind of I deal with that. It's almost like feeding your ego, but that's kind of a narcissistic way to feel, because feeding your ego is a shallow thing to do. But when you go and help people to use your life to make their lives better, it helps your faith that you can look at and say, yes, I believe without proof that it's like when I said to the teacher, you say things through litany like a script, it just becomes automatic, and you kind of don't believe it. You just go through it. But then when you hear the feedback, then it reinforms, yes, that solidifies my faith. And I just, it gets vague sometimes, to where, for me, sometimes the boundaries and the blur between ego and faith, are you feeding my ego or are you feeding my faith? And I look at life in the perspective that we're all here temporarily. This is a temporary service, and one day we're gonna die like my dad did, and we're gonna go to heaven, and we're gonna meet Jesus Christ and God. And we need to prepare ourselves to do that. And this is the faith journey that I'm going through. And actually, the ultimate amount of faith is believing in heaven and eternity. That is what I just struggle with. Is it really true? Is heaven really there? Is God really there? And then that's when the ego goes away and the faith comes in. That's when that goes away and my ego's not. Because I spend life and is it true? Is heaven really there? And I do study, and I read book after book after book. And yes, I do believe. And that makes me, that propels me, it propels me to continue to teach about love. It feels good. It makes me feel good to know that there is a place in heaven for all of us, and that all of our lives aren't here happenstance. We're all here for a purpose. We have to search, go through life. We have to connect the dots. We have to look at our life, reflect, and look at our history, look at our talents, and see if we can public speak, or see if we can write, or see if we can build on that, and then use our life to make other lives better, and then discover our purpose. And that is my whole journey, is discovering my life's purpose, because it's bigger than our life. Our life is just, we're not here to serve ourselves. We're here to serve God and other people.
Right. And well, we're out of time, but I want to thank you so very much.
Thank you,
for
Alan,
sharing your journey and
thank you very
your
much for inviting
experience.
me.
And we want to thank you as well for joining us. And we hope that Ted's story has kind of touched you and encouraged you to pursue, what is it that God may be calling you to, and to both pursue your faith and enliven it. So we'll hope to see you again. And in the meantime, we'll be praying for you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.